we are at the verge of one of the largest energy transitions in the world. If everything is done right, by the end of 2035, 30% of installations in the world for solar will be in India.
While we talk about net zero by 2070, by visionary Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, it is a reality looking at past 10 years.
Emission is a worldwide problem, and we should focus on how to mitigate pollution.
This entire transition to net zero or to a more, climate-supported futures of tomorrow will have to be a just and fair transition.
So good morning to all of you once again. Namaskar. And it's a pleasure, delight to be greeting you all on behalf of Exhibitions India Group to the day 3 of the Smart Cities India Conclave and the very first session. Today, as we are addressing the various verticals of smart cities, today we begin with the Smart Energy Conclave. And with our eminent speakers in this session, we are going to be exploring India's mixed energy basket, which presently is dominated by coal and oil, more by the fossil fuels. But we are moving towards more cleaner energy. And that is where we are going to be looking into this energy basket as India aims to become net zero by 2070, a pledge, a commitment which has been given by our Honorable Prime Minister in COP26. And towards that, the Honorable Prime Minister has also said, given a commitment, that by 2030, we are going to be reducing our emissions to almost 1 billion. By 2030, almost 50% of our energy is going to be coming from the renewables. India, of course, has a greater challenge of development, where we are wanting to become a $5 trillion economy and a $10 trillion economy by 2030. So there's a challenge of development. On the other hand, there is of the emissions. But then the very realistic commitment and a very achievable commitment has been given by our Prime Minister of 2070 becoming net zero. So the energy basket, in fact, yesterday when we were talking about the automobile and the mobility sector, there also we are looking into more a mixed basket. So today we explore these different alternative fuels: hydro, solar, wind, biomass, and as we heard yesterday from the private secretary of Shri Nitin Gadkari ji, the minister there has, in the mobility sector, has a vision that the annadata, the agriculturalists, the farmers, can also now become an urja data. So that's the vision which the government of India is taking forward as we are talking about more cleaner fuels or cleaner energy. Now, in this session, we are going to be looking into the policies. We are going to be looking into how our cities can reduce carbon emissions to achieve the 2070 target, how to optimize on water, solar, and hydro. The renewable energy sector, where does Make in India is an advantage. We are going to be exploring that, because India, as it is aiming to become a $10 trillion economy, we are working on having a more climate-sensitive growth, a climate-sensitive development, reducing our emissions, and going the renewable way. What are the business models that can improve the bankability of the green economy projects? These are some of the discussion points which we are going to be taking with from our eminent speakers. So I invite the speakers, as I'm told, our moderator, Dr. Anil Garg, is going to be joining us shortly. Meanwhile, let me invite the speakers, Mr. Amit Kaushik, the Chief of Cluster Project and Program Implementation Unit, International Solar Alliance. He has extensive experience of almost 25 years working across various important ministries, power, defense, home affairs. He's leading a highly skilled team of professionals who are responsible for facilitating pragmatic support to ISA members, the Indian Solar Alliance, International Solar Alliance, which India is a member and a leader there. And he has been very closely working with the ISA members. We have Mr. Subrahmanyam Pulipaka, the CEO of the National Solar Energy Federation of India. This is an important organization which is representing the solar energy companies of India. Our next eminent speaker, Ms. Ritu, the Senior Vice President and the Head of the Institutional Relations at Amplus Solar. She's been a very keen advocate for the policy support and the initiatives that can maximize India's adoption of solar. She's also been training the energy professionals and government officials from various countries on how to make solar commercially viable. And then we have Ms. Smita Rakesh, the Vice President and Partner, Social Alpha. She leads the Climate and Sustainability Mission. Again, our focus, as we're talking about the climate-sensitive development, climate-sensitive growth, she's been playing a very important role. We all stand aware that because of the climate change, we have heard of very drastic climatic changes and temperature changes happening in Antarctica and Arctic, almost 30-degree rise. And that is where each of us have to make a very conscious effort towards reducing this climate change or mitigating this climate impact. Smita has been deeply engaged with the global climate ecosystem for the last 14 years. She has been contributing across a wide spectrum of institutional programs and various interventions she's been taking in the public, private and the development sector. So welcome to all our panelists. I think Dr. Garg, as he's going to be joining us shortly, I'll just, he's going to be joining in as we take this session. I'll just briefly also introduce him and then I'll request Amit to take the session forward. Dr. Garg is the CEO of the Energy and the Environment Foundation, that's as we call it as E2 Foundation. This is a not-for-profit organization that has been extensively working towards the betterment of billions of poor people who presently don't have or have very little access to electricity. He's been an extremely passionate person. He's worked in the energy sector for almost 3 decades. He was with the ONGC earlier. He has promoted renewable energy and he encourages the use of clean and green technology to achieve the carbon neutral growth. And he has been organizing various conferences and summits like the World Petro Coal, the World Renewable, even Waste to Wealth Summit, Hydrogen Energy Summit. We heard about from the Honorable Minister's PS yesterday and his consultant also, the Minister also, Gadkari ji, promoting hydrogen, and HCNG is one of the new energy fuel which we are going to be seeing. So today, as we take these discussions more on achieving the net zero by 2070, I request our speakers for their views and their insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Subrahmanyam Pulipaka, the CEO of National Solar Energy Federation of India. I'll be your stand-in moderator until Dr. Garg comes, and then I'll switch back to being a panelist after he comes. A very good morning to all of you. As we just heard, India today is at an interesting juncture when it comes to our fight against climate change. We are the world's 4th largest country in terms of installed renewable energy capacity and 5th largest in terms of installed solar capacity. On 14 December last year, we touched 150 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel installed capacity. Honorable Prime Minister during COP26 has given a clarion call for a 5-point Panchamrit, which will take India closer to net zero. Today, I am very happy to be joined with a stellar panel of experts who have been having experience, who have been working closely in the climate change field for the last 2-3 decades. And I think we can use their wisdom and get insights from what they think about net zero. First and foremost, I would like to start with Mr. Amit Kaushik to share his views about the path to net zero for India today and how is it possible or how is it viable for us to achieve the carbon neutrality by 2070 and get on the path for becoming energy independent in this process.
Colleagues, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very happy morning. Thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk about this very important aspect of net zero climate change. It's not something very new. All of you are very well aware of that. A decade back, solar energy as a mainstream energy was some kind of an aspiration. A decade later today, it has become a reality. India, in its journey of last 1 decade, has not only created the gigawatts, the scales, but also have created a talented pool of entrepreneurs, technicians, engineers working in the renewable energy, particularly in solar. While we talk about net zero by 2070 by visionary Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, it is a reality looking at past 10 years. The capacity addition which is happening in the renewable energy and particularly in solar is very inspirational. I would refrain myself talking much about India because my fellow panelists are going to talk and other sessions are going to talk about this. I would like to just mention to you and talk about another visionary action by Prime Minister Modi is creation of International Solar Alliance. International Solar Alliance was launched at COP21 in 2015 by Prime Minister Modi and President Hollande of France. India is the president and France is the co-president. International Solar Alliance today has 103 members. All the sovereign governments are the member of this alliance. This is the vision of Prime Minister Modi to take the cause of solar, scaling up solar in mainly LDC and SIDS countries, and also across the globe, wherever it is needed. We all do understand and appreciate that the recent crisis geopolitically has created a very steep rise in energy prices. The fossil fuel prices not only affect the people, but also affect the economies of the nations. The forex reserves do get depleted, and also the frequency of currency fluctuations also goes up. Thus, the main important aspect here is you have to be self-reliant. As Prime Minister has given the motto of Atmanirbhar. So how do you remain Atmanirbhar? Probably solar is one of the right solutions to remain Atmanirbhar in terms of energy needs. Now, let me just take you through to what International Solar Alliance is doing. As I mentioned, that 103 member countries mainly focused on scaling up solar in LDC and SIDS countries. International Solar Alliance works under 3 pillars: analytics and advocacy, capacity building, and programmatic support to the member countries. There are 9 programs which International Solar Alliance is having today. That is right from solar for agriculture use to affordable finance for solar applications to solar mini-grid, solar rooftop, solar park, floating solar, then your solar for hydrogen and solar waste management, solar for e-mobility. 9 programs International Solar Alliance is running and giving programmatic support to its member countries. Just to mention, under Solar Park program, that is program number 6, International Solar Alliance is engaged with 30 member countries, out of which 16 have given the expression of interest and 9 have given project management consultant to one of the Indian government-owned company, that is NTPC Limited. This all amounts to 5 gigawatt of capacity. That is what we are supporting member countries, taking the cause and scaling up solar in those countries where it is needed most, thus directly impacting and facilitating the countries to achieve their NDC, which they have been announcing and revising as recent as in COP26 and Glasgow in 2021. Not only this programmatic support, but also International Solar Alliance is implementing demonstration projects in 27 member countries across Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. International Solar Alliance has given 50,000 USD grant to the member countries for these demonstration projects. Also under ISA CARE program, solarization of primary health center in 22 countries is already in some or the other stage of implementation, either in the discussion stage or in the implementation stage. In the capacity building, International Solar Alliance have trained more than 1,000 bankers from 53 countries across the globe, because we do appreciate that while financing of the project and innovative financial models are very much important, so the bankers are very important link to this value chain. So ISA, with its member countries, is working very hard to see that scaling up of solar takes place and the climate mitigation also does take place. ISA also have almost 40 partner organizations with whom we are working. That includes UNEP, UNIDO, UNDP, IRENA, GGGI, IPSA, and many more. In fact, very recently as day before yesterday, we have signed an MOU with Western African Power Pool to scale up solar park programs in Western African countries. So like that, International Solar Alliance, under the leadership of President ISA Assembly, Honorable Minister Mr. R.K. Singh, and under the leadership of Director General ISA, Dr. Ajay Mathur, we are working very hard with member countries and with our partner organizations to see that at the earliest, the scaling up of solar applications across the fields takes place in our member countries, thus directly impacting the mitigation of the climate effect. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a serious threat. Very recently, we have seen what happened in Tonga. And also many of the 6 countries are likely to be on the verge of extinction if the temperature rises below 1.5 degrees in a couple of years to come. So I, while representing International Solar Alliance, think that solar is the best solution for not only mitigating the climate effects, but also for energy access. 800 million people on Earth today are without access to electricity, and 600 million people are alone in Africa. That means the humanity and all the organizations, all of us have to come together, join hands together, and ensure that while on one end we have access to electricity to everybody, every house, every home should have light, no matter how far it may be. And at the same time, we should be worried about the climate issues. So putting both the things together, I again very strongly feel that renewable energy and particularly solar is the right solution. I once again thank organizers for inviting me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience hearing. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaushik. I am also very happy to announce our moderator, Dr. Anil K. Garg is here. Thank you very much, sir. I am now very happy to hand it over back to him to moderate this panel. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, our panel members, distinguished panelists, and our distinguished participants. Without you, we are nothing. So, my apologies for coming late due to heavy traffic at ITPO. The session is very, very important, as Mr. Subrahmanyam has already said, that emission is a worldwide problem and we should focus on how to mitigate pollution and how to have our clean energy goal in mind. And that's why cooperation of government, cooperation of public and private, and more than that, a mass movement is required for this big cause. Our target is fixed for 2070, net zero, but without your cooperation and support, it is difficult. And that's why we are here to discuss innovation, investment, and concern for the environment. I will request my other fellow colleagues to throw light on this. If Mr. Amit is here. Okay. So I will request my other colleague to address briefly on this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garg Saab, and it's very happy to see people in person after a long time. Last 2 years have been challenging to all of us. Like I was mentioning in my introductory remarks, today India is at a very interesting juncture where we are at the verge of one of the largest energy transitions in the world. If everything is done right, by the end of 2035, 30% of installations in the world for solar will be in India. That is where we are. Before I pass on to my other panelists, I'll just make 2 or 3 remarks to set the context. So net zero is not just net zero. We have to look at where net zero can be actually alluded to different sectors that are today in the country. Very often it's a misconception that we take net zero as electricity net zero. But it's not just electricity. We have industry, we have mobility, we have agriculture, we have every other allied sector which is at the end of the day contributing to net zero, or which is responsible for net zero. So let us look at all these 4 verticals, starting with industry. Today decarbonization is must for industrial applications to achieve net zero. Technologies like green hydrogen, solar, wind, hybrid, all of these things are gaining prominence, and I think a push is needed from these sectors to decarbonize the industry. In industry, again, there are specifics. You have manufacturing oriented industries, service oriented industries, retail. All these things have different electricity requirements or energy needs, and all of them should be duly addressed in our path to net zero, which is what we are talking today. The second aspect is mobility. So all said and done, if you have an electric car and you're charging it from the grid, which has more thermal power, then what is the point of having an electric car? So decarbonizing mobility and getting us closer to net zero also requires us to, push the accelerator, both figuratively and literally, towards decarbonizing the mobility sector too. Today, a couple of days back, we had a session on green hydrogen, chaired by Dr. V.K. Saraswat from NITI Aayog, and mobility has come up. So we should also find solutions, including e-mobility, hydrogen mobility, methanol, ethanol, whatever fuel which we can use to ensure that our mobility is truly decarbonized. The third sector is agriculture. Contrary to popular opinion, 25 to 30% of emissions come from agriculture sector too. These emissions, this is a chicken and egg problem. You have agriculture sector which has emissions or which contributes to carbon footprint, and carbon footprint is contributing to climate change, and climate change is in turn contributing to the deteriorating quality of the food or crops. So this is the entire circle. So I am the chair of IRENA's working group on renewables in agriculture, where we are trying to bring or sort of outline the applications of renewables in agriculture and how agriculture can become climate friendly. Climate compatible agriculture, CCA. That's what we are trying to do. And I think as an agrarian economy, India should look into it. Green hydrogen, green ammonia should not just be looked for fuels, but also for India as a country. Because ammonia, we subsidize them heavily. We import it from Belarus and all countries, and we subsidize 65%. Imagine we are able to produce them in India. You're hitting two birds with one stone. You're decarbonizing and you're decreasing the subsidy. That is the agriculture part. Fourth, my favorite subject, the reason I don't get more than 4 hours of sleep every day is electricity. As a solar federation, we are working very, I won't say aggressively, but with intense focus on ensuring solar energy share in our entire energy mix increases to 40 to 50% in the next 10 years and then scales up to 65% by 2050 as per our targets. We have a roadmap. There are some impediments. Some of our panelists will, anyhow, they can talk about that. But the underlying statement that we have to understand here, or underlying aspect that we have to focus here, is how can we focus more on the spread rather than the growth. Today we have solar energy installed capacity of 50.62 gigawatt in India. 47 comes from solar parks. But the very virtue of renewable energy or solar energy in particular is it can be produced where it's consumed. So how can that be now accelerated, and proliferation of distributed solar or renewable energy can be given focus is something that we have to look in the electricity sector. Apart from that, I'm sure once storage becomes viable, fuels like hydrogen come into place, new battery technologies which are cost compatible are into the market, we will of course scale down on our reliance on coal, which will of course take us more closer to our net zero ambitions. So these are the four pillars: the industry, mobility, agriculture and electricity, which I think are the bus stops in the path to net zero, and we have to attend each and every stop with equal attention, if not more than anyone else, and ensure that we are in that road to achieve net zero 48 years from now. Those are my opening remarks.
Thank you, my dear. So I will request the eminent panelist, Ms. Ritu Lal, please address.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for having me on this panel. And it's been great to hear the views so far. And my colleague Subbu has made some very, very pertinent points about a holistic approach to getting to net zero. Now, when we say net zero, that it's like very simple. It's like, I have created so much of emission, and then I am doing alternate greening to remove that emission. So with that in mind, I think the size of the emissions generated is also important. Whether I am generating 20 tons and mitigating with 20, or whether I am generating 200 tons and trying to mitigate the 200. Because even the mitigation has its own footprint, cost, and perhaps efficacy. So there has to be a lot of effort on emitting less. Unfortunately, that is one area where I think this year COP26, I think it was agreed that mitigating emissions has failed. What we have managed to do is perhaps create more green, and the actual amount of emissions, especially carbon dioxide, they have not abated. If anything, they continue to increase, and there is a very little amount left after which we hit saturation point. Good thing or bad thing, at least there was now near consensus that climate change is not a debate. It is real. So far, there were very influential sections of the world that kept denying climate change, that kept saying it is, one point of view of one group of scientists. But now we have complete agreement, almost complete agreement. I think there are fewer things in the world in my lifetime that I've seen so much of agreement on, that climate change is real and that we are in the midst of a climate emergency. So there is no option other than doing something. It's not like, okay, this is a good to have, X is a poor country, Y is a rich country, and I know, and even that discussion has shifted. If you look at what COP21 did in 2015, right? There was more about, okay, we are in this situation, there are developing countries and there are developed countries, and yes, that argument absolutely holds true even today. That, these emissions are not going there, these emissions have been created ever since the Industrial Revolution came about. And industrialization is also a must-have for the entire world. So those who have already consumed more need to have a greater responsibility. But today, that being said, and completely agree with the principle of it, whether there is onus or responsibility or not, for countries like India and the other countries which are still industrializing, we have to mitigate with or without global support, because somewhere or the other, it does not matter whether it's my air or somebody else's air, we share the same planet and borders are only on the ground, and the higher we go in the atmosphere, the more freely particles travel all around. And we know that particles that were generated 200 years ago are still floating within the system. So that's the state of where we are. Two things that I'd like to focus on is electricity and then greening the grid. Because yes, we talk about electric vehicles. Yeah, today if I replace the entire bus, diesel or bus truck or three-wheeler fleet in the NCR, will the NCR pollution index come down? Yes. But the actual emissions, as Subbu rightly said, would actually go up, because the grid is still primarily being fed by fossil fuels. Despite whatever gigawatts, about 100 gigawatts of renewable capacity, the contribution is only about 10%. It remains very low, right? So what we are doing is we are mitigating immediate pollution concerns. If we were not in a state of climate emergency, if carbon emissions were in control, this would have worked very well. That, in the rural area where you're generating, where it is getting dissipated, it is not a problem right now, this works well. But today, when we are already beyond what we should be doing in terms of carbon emissions, we have to green the grid. Electric vehicles are the future. So greening the grid becomes very important, which leads me to the next point that we sometimes gloss over. It's mentioned as an important afterthought, which is storage. We are still waiting for the right technology. I'll put my neck out, I'll stick my neck out and say the next 10 years belongs to lithium in commercial storage. You can talk sodium, you can talk vanadium and whatever other, chemicals that we are talking about. But lithium has been worked on for the last 15 years. It's commercially scalable. This is what is being used right in your mobile phones to the electric vehicles, right? Most of them are lithium batteries. And whether or not we have access to it in our country or not, whether or not we have manufacturing of the cell in our country or not, the next 10 years commercially will belong to lithium. Other technologies may well come up. But from the time that something develops to the time that it becomes commercially scalable is minimum 5 to 8 years. And unfortunately, we've missed the bus on lithium. We've missed that bus on storage. And I've been in this sector not very long, but I've been here 8 years. And for the first 5 of those 8 years at least, what I heard at events was that we are trying to see which technology to adopt. Yes, it looks like it's going to be lithium, but let it stabilize and then we will invest. Now the thing is, it's a very competitive market out there. By the time you waited to see, yes, this finally works, it's too late, because the risk takers I don't know whether I should call them risk takers or the early, adopters. People who, yes, there was a risk in it, but who did their, risk-benefit analysis and found that the benefits far outweighed the risks of investing in lithium technology and in trying to generate manufacturing. It's been cornered. Now we have moved on to hydrogen, right? Because everybody, right now, level playing field in hydrogen across the world. So there is no advantage, disadvantage. But hydrogen is not a replacement for the kind of storage that lithium or whatever next technology that comes after that is going to provide. You are going to have to green the grid. The reality is electric vehicles will be charged at night. Solar will not be available at night. Wind is also seasonal, and even in wind, there are day-night cycles. The electric vehicle is going to ply during the day and be plugged in at night. So you're going to have to green the grid, which means you're going to have to store green electricity or any other form of renewable electricity which you can produce at night if you can. And that's what you need to feed into the grid. Otherwise, you're just going to add to the pollution in the air. So I think irrespective of access to lithium, costs associated, we have to start adopting storage now and in at least 10x of the scale that we are envisioning. At least 10x to the scale. Hydrogen will have its benefits. Hydrogen will be there in, maybe larger vehicles. Hydrogen can be used in heavy engineering, in those kind of industries, iron and steel and those kind of industries, ideally suited. But a passenger vehicle with hydrogen or a grid functioning on hydrogen is still not really the most economical, feasible way forward. So I would like to get the focus back on storage. And the last thing I would like to talk about is electrification with renewables. And here again, it looks like we are doing very well. We have achieved 50 gigawatts of solar capacity. But now we need to get to at least 300. Okay? And that is just capacity. Now when it comes to renewables, capacity means nothing, it's all about generation. You talk about fossil fuel, you talk about a coal fed thermal plant, it can operate theoretically at 100%, right? In the past, it used to operate in the 90s, which is the steadiest state it can operate in. The problem happens if you try and flexibilize thermal generation plants. They don't work very well if you try and scale an 80 down to a 60, down to a 50, scale it up to 70, 75. It takes time, it takes a lot of wear and tear, it's high maintenance. And again, the emission levels start to change. So if I'm working at 75% capacity utilization, emissions are in control. But if I try and bring it down to 35, my emissions also go out of whack, right? So that is one problem with thermal generation, which again brings me back to storage. One option is also, instead of scaling down your thermal, try and put that into storage, right? When it comes to renewables, you focus on quality. And that is something which I don't think we put too much of effort on, right? Look at, I'll close with the last 2 minutes with one example. So my company, Amplus Solar, we largely work in rooftop solar, right? So now the space available at a rooftop of any company is limited. Yeah. So how do I maximize solar generation? By using high efficiency modules, right? Solar panels. So solar panels come in all sizes and efficiencies. Now the higher size and the higher efficiency ones are more expensive. But over a lifetime of generation, which is at least 25-30 years, because they are generating about, to give you a sense of difference, a lot of modules which are domestically manufactured are 300, 350, 400 watt per module. That's the maximum capacity it has. What we use, the tier 1 imported modules, they're all above 500, 550, close to 600, and they're talking even of 800 and 900 watt modules for almost the same size, right? So imagine the difference in output. So if I have a limited space, I think I should ensure that I am able to generate more efficiently. So the same space can give me 70 units a day Or if I use better modules, I get 100 units a day. It's as stark as that. So while I understand that, it is very important to have domestic module capabilities and Atmanirbhar in manufacturing, I think the ultimate goal of being Atmanirbhar in energy generation is more in the national interest. And if whatever we are investing in manufacturing, whether it is storage, where we have again missed the bus, whether it is solar manufacturing, where again we have missed the bus, we need to ensure that the technology, the R&D, the quality and the price competitiveness is right up there. Because unless all four are imbalanced, we are going to see an imbalanced growth, which is not going to be helping our net zero future. So I'll end my remarks with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. Now I will request our distinguished panelist, Ms. Smita Rakesh, to kindly address.
Thank you. I hope I am clearly audible. Thank you. I think a lot of interesting comments already made, and I'll keep myself restricted to 4 or 5 key things. I represent an organization called Social Alpha. We are a multi-stage innovation, curation, and venture development organization. We're a not-for-profit. And the idea is that we want to be supporting early-stage innovation in climate, in livelihoods, in healthcare, for a holistic world and future for tomorrow. I represent and I lead the work we do in climate, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So the first thing that I want to say, and I think it needs to be said as many times over and over again, is that this entire transition to net zero or to a more climate-supported futures of tomorrow will have to be a just and fair transition. And especially in the context of India, but overall, we cannot talk of net zero or the climate goals in isolation of what else is going on around us. We have access issues, we have infrastructure issues, we have equitability is a big problem, right? We're talking about communities that are suffering as well as are being seen as contributors. And I think Subrahmanyam talked about it earlier today. How do we look at this whole transition being as inclusive, and whether it's in the context of cities that we are here talking about, or it is in the context of countries or globally? Inclusive. What is the cost of this transition? Is it just the money that we'll spend on installing new renewable capacity or in making these tech transitions? Or is it also the cost of loss of livelihoods or capacity building, right? How do we incorporate this entire cost structure? And what is needed is beyond just deployment of solutions, right? So making sure we are looking at that, and we are staying as true to the Indian context as possible when we talk about our path to net zero by 2070. So that's the first thing I wanted to get out there. And when I say inclusion, socio-economic inclusion, gender inclusion, and regional inclusion. Let's think about what within India too, the geography of is going to change. The socio-economic context of this transition will change. Which are the states that are providing the coal-based power? Which are the states which will be manufacturing all the renewable energy that we're talking about? How is that change in the economy, the local economies of each of these states? How are we prepared to handle that, right? So understanding this context, understanding what does it take to make this transition and working towards it is something as a country we've got to prioritize. The second very, very important area, and that's the area we work in, and I think our previous speakers also highlighted that, is that of innovation. We are where we are because we clearly didn't have the right solutions to the problem that the globe is facing today, not just in climate, but also in other areas. And therefore, we need to innovate and find newer solutions. But newer solutions are not, we don't have an ecosystem that is conducive to new innovation sprouting up and being taken up from lab to market and being scaled up in a seamless manner. How do we make sure that all of these innovations that are yet to come or are in super early stages of their commercialization, how are they going to make it in time enough for us to reach net zero and not be in a situation where the doomsday is there and not much can be done? An IEA report, recent one, I think it came a couple of years ago, a year ago, basically highlighted how more than 50% of innovations which are game-changing in energy transition are all locked in very, very early stages and haven't reached the market yet. Are we prepared? Do we have an ecosystem that's open to innovation, that has the right testing grounds, that has an appetite and funding for failures and experimentation, that allows a quick feedback loop for innovation to be succeeded, by a more successful one as soon as possible? I think, Ritu spoke about energy storage, which is the biggest elephant in any room when you talk climate, right? When we talk of this transition, it is going to be the biggest revolution in this space, whatever new technologies we come up with. So while we are making do with the solutions that we have right now in storage, a large part of energy storage research and innovation is in very, very early stages and requires very high capital to reach the kind of commercialization and scale that's needed. Do we have that kind of patient capital available? Are we investing enough in R&D? Do we understand where these innovations are coming from and facilitating that enough? Important questions to be asked. Yes, climate investment space is showing some good trends. I think this year's report, which looked at 2021 investments in the impact investment space, saw that climate tech received close to 23-24% of all investments. And out of those, it was heartening to see 65% in terms of number of deals come from very early stages. That's a good trend, but we're still a long way away from this space where we know that a lot of potential of what will actually happen is trapped in early stages. And therefore, a lot of action is needed in early stages to push entrepreneurs, to push innovators, to create the future that we're trying to create. I think the other important point that I want to be making is, if net zero is a goal, our goal is not, what we are chasing right now and what we've been chasing as a country, but also globally so far, have been outputs in terms of, installed renewable capacity, in terms of urban transition, in terms of waste handling, etc. What we now need to be looking at is, if we are talking net zero, it's super audacious and ambitious. How do we embed this impact goal earlier on? An impact understanding is always a retrospective, unfortunately so. How do we build that lens earlier on, where now our prioritization of innovation areas, our prioritization of technologies we want to be working on is designed on the basis of their contribution to this mitigation scenario? How do we prioritize carbon capture enough? It's going to be a bigger part of it, because carbon is not the evil we made out to be. It's carbon in the atmosphere which is the problem. And therefore, how do we make sure there's enough activities, enough innovation being incentivized on carbon capture? Soil carbon is a big area where we need to be working, where it solves two ends of the same problem, right? And I think we spoke about agriculture and how it's a contributor to climate change, but also one of the biggest victims of the early impacts of climate change that we are already seeing. Understanding climate compatible agriculture that you spoke about, but also climate resilient agriculture. And that's where the opportunity lies. The good thing about our climate challenge today is that it sits on both ends. It sits on the end of opportunities as well as on the end of challenges. And therefore, cracking it is never going to be, if we do it the right way, and if we incentivize innovations the right way, it was always going to be synergistic with the kind of economic incentives, with the kind of economic future we see for ourselves, and is going to be looking at a reduction in green premiums as we go along. But as long as we're not working in silos, as long as we are creating this seamless spectrum of actors, which is ensuring that our goals are aligned and our larger mandate is aligned. And with that, I think I'll pause for now, but I'd like to make a very, very huge case for all sectors and all actors being looking at enabling early stage entrepreneurs, early stage innovators with as stronger a focus and with a more patient capital, as well as the opportunity to experiment and fail, so that they can experiment soon enough and bounce back. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. Now I will request each of the panel members to kindly address the investment in this sector, so that a net zero goal is achieved by 2070. You have already addressed on innovation, technology, and third pillar is investment, and fourth is concern for the environment. I will just briefly request our distinguished panelists to kindly address, and finally we will sum up and close the session. I think you should have something take away from this panel discussion from here. Now I will request Mr. Subrahmanyam, please.
I will keep my remarks limited to the investments in the clean energy sector because that is where we work every day. And I have the data from the ministry here. Between 2010-11 and 2019-20, the last 10 years, 1 decade, we have received 8 billion only in the clean energy sector. And please mind the fact that renewable energy is one of the few industries where 100% FDI is allowed. Now, for meeting our long-term commitments, we need almost 2 lakh crores and total 2 lakh crores every year and 17 lakh crores in the next 8-9 years. As a matter of fact, India is still the world's most attractive destination for RE investments, irrespective of whatever challenges or impediments we have. And most of the investments, what we see in the next 7 to 8 years, they say there is no transition without transmission. And out of the 17 lakh crores, at least half of them will go into our transmission infrastructure. Green corridor, 1,64,000 kilometers, out of which we have only 60,000 now. Almost 1,04,000 kilometers are in the process. Some are in bidding stage, some are in implementing stage, some are in execution stage. So I think we require a lot of investments, and this is the time in the Indian renewable energy story or journey where we have to hit the accelerated pace. We were in the nascent stage, investments are steadily flowing. Last 3-4 years we got almost, in terms of total investments in the sector, it was almost $14 billion. Last year we had at least $6 billion worth M&A activity in the Indian sector. But the next 1 decade, we foresee at least 78 to 90 gigawatt of installations and 150 to 200 billion dollars in the solar sector. The allied sectors of solar like agri-solar, solar manufacturing, green hydrogen, all these things are going to see more uptake from the foreign investors than solar in the next few years. Of course, solar has been receiving steady investments, but the new sub-sectors or new green energy allied sectors are going to get more funds according to us. But all in all, I think we are in a good trajectory, I should say, and hopefully it should get us closer to our target in the next 40 years.
Thank you, Subrahmanyam. Now I will request Miss Ritu Lal to kindly address.
Thanks for that, sir. I had once read a magic number, and that said to meet our net zero ambitions and the kind of investments across the entire ecosystem, transmission, distribution, various forms of renewable, storage, hydrogen, and they said that the number was $1 trillion. So I don't know timeline, but that's the number which I have heard. In any case, I think you are talking about every decade we are going to spend 20-30 billion, right? So looks like we got to get investments of 20-30 billion dollars. So perhaps till 2070, it's, yeah, I think I may be actually on the more conservative side. So it looks like it's going to be $1 trillion industry overall, the entire ecosystem for net zero.
Now, Smita, please.
Thank you. Yes, you know the numbers now and how daunting they look. But I see hope. I'll tell you why. Hope comes from a very, very unfortunate place, which is what is happening in Ukraine right now. But there's hope because now, sadly enough, what treaties could not do for all these decades, this Russian aggression on Ukraine, and I'll call it that and not the Russia-Ukraine war, is doing, right? It's now giving everybody, especially the West, more reasons to put in money behind this. So I see hope stemming from a tragedy, but I do see hope in terms of investments, big investments coming. And, like Subrahmanyam also said, India is also a market, and therefore India is going to be the hotspot of receiving a lot of that investment. How do we channel that? How do we make sure we're prioritizing the right areas is where there's going to be a key, and not neglecting areas which have universally been neglected, historically been neglected within climate? The least favorite is probably the waste space. Energy and power, rightly so, receives the kind of attention it does, because power is the fulcrum of everything else, right? Whether you talk industries, transport, anything. So it's not just the generation of power that's contributing, but also the use of power in other sectors. But whatever happened to our waste problem? How do we make sure we get the right investment attention there as well? So I think as a country, we have to make sure our priorities are at the forefront. We don't forget access, we don't forget wastes, we don't forget some of these areas which are not glamorous enough. But at the same time, make sure that we have a role, we are going to be in the spotlight in terms of channeling a lot of that funding, utilizing it the right way, and therefore our feet have to be on the ground running, have to hit the ground running, and our prioritization has to be, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. Now I will say two things only. Number one, the smart vehicles, electric vehicles, and hydrogen. This is one thing. Electric vehicles are required and they are must. Hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen. In green hydrogen, which is through the electrolysis of water, water is very important. There are various research that from salt water, this hydrogen can be created through catalysts and electrolytes. So this is a possibility. The cost of green hydrogen is 4 times more than the blue hydrogen, which is from coal and other sources this can be manufactured. This hydrogen is used for aviation fuels. Hydrogen is good for aviation fuel in aircraft and also for heavy trucks and for heavy vessels in water. So hydrogen is plus there. Whereas the battery, lithium-ion battery and others, they are required in electrical charging vehicles. So this is number one. Second thing, cooperation of each and everybody is required. That is through using the natural resource optimally. This means where water is required, you should use it, but use it judicially. That will help our planet and achieve the goal of net zero. Thank you very much for inviting me and for other distinguished panelists for making this a remarkable panel discussion session. I think there is something which is very important for you to take from here. We are also having an international conference on renewable energy in August 21st and 22nd. We will organize, and we are also organizing hydrogen conference in November. So we will all invite you, and you will have international speakers on this aspect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you to Dr. Garg, and thank you to all our esteemed panelists for giving you insights on how we can actually achieve the target of net zero. We are going to be requesting all of you also to hold your thoughts and the information which you have received just now in this session. For we are going to be moving into our next session. Again, that's going to be a panel discussion. It's whatever we have gauged from here, it's going to be actually has set the tone and the context for our next session, wherein further we are going to be looking into the innovations and the technology aspect of how do we address the climate change. So the tea is going to be there, the running tea, but request you to remain with us in this hall. As I thank, may I request our speakers to kindly accept this small token of our gratitude, appreciation as we present the mementos to you. Thanking Ms. Smita Rakesh. Thanking Mr. Pulipaka, who will be now the moderator of our next session. And our esteemed thanks to Dr. Anil Garg.